TCU's looking to get the monkey off of their back.
Well, for Kansas State, they just need to find a way to just get a win.
It's Locked On Kansas State, Locked On Horned Frogs crossover. Play my music.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's going on, family? Welcome back to another episode of Locked On Horned Frogs or Locked On Kansas State. Whoever you're tuning in with, thank you to all of my everydayers. I, of course, am Darrion Gray, and this is Christian Rao. We're doing a crossover of the purple schools. There's been multiple times where I clicked Kansas State, said, oh, no, got to click Locked On Horned Frogs when trying to do my live show. So now we get to kind of meet in the middle. We get to talk a little Big 12 football. Christian, how you feeling?
Darrion, I'm feeling good, man. It's good that I finally have a crossover with you. Welcome to the Big 12. Welcome to welcome to the Locked On Network, but welcome over to the Big 12 squad. I really appreciate you having on. You've been killing it so far, and I'm excited to talk this game. Not excited so much on the Kansas State side, but a lot of things I think are hanging on the game and the balance when it comes to Big 12 competition, especially for Sonny Dykes and TCU.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that's actually probably we went over some storylines before, and then my mind just started racing. So forgive me if I throw a curveball, but I feel like Kansas State is done. I feel like 2 losses is kind of finished in the Big 12. Are we aligned on that?
In early October, yes, I think you're right. I think the narrative, you can't say this team can still go to Arlington. Statistically, is it still possible? I mean, yeah, you'd need a lot of things to go right. 7-2 is what got you to Arlington last year with a bunch of tiebreakers and things like that. You'd have to win out and then hope for a couple miracles on the back end, but I just don't see that happening. So no, I'm calling it now. For the chances for Big 12 and Kansas State, it's over. The best thing now is to try and maintain the standard, get to where you were last year, 8-4, and that's winning out. And maybe find yourself at least in a bowl game. It's really sad feeling because I thought this team was a 10-2 team as their ceiling, or really just expectations.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's why I think this game is pivotal for TCU, because if you lose, you find yourself in the same boat where you're sitting here hoping for a bowl game when you have Big 12 aspirations. You have championship or playoff aspirations. So I think that is, we'll do a line. And I think that I don't want to be in the same place that you're feeling, where it's like, at least we can get over here. You know, that sucks at this point in the season, of course, but it's going to be difficult to do, because Kansas State is a tough place to play, specifically for the Horned Frogs. They've struggled. They didn't win last time. I think, when was the last time they beat Kansas State at home? I think it was 2017.
It's been a minute. It's been a minute.
It's been a while. Why is that such a tough place to play?
Well, Bill Snyder Family Stadium, the fans are great. I mean, perfect example is the game against UCF just a few weeks ago. This team was 1-4 heading into that football game, and they had their 11th highest attendance in the history of the program, with I think it was 57,000 people when you were 1-4. So the fans still show up, and that's something that is really exciting to think about. That they really love this program and they cheer hard. So it's a tough environment. There's no doubt about it. So if you're going to just look at the record of Kansas State, you're doing yourself a disservice, because if you're going into Manhattan, just like you mentioned and brought it up on this one, that's an entirely different factor. And even if they have a losing record, that's not going to change the fact that these fans are going to show up, because they absolutely are.
Yeah, you talk about who you are versus what your record is. And I think that there's always been discussion about that. I think the TCU just played a team in Colorado who is a little bit better than their record. I don't know how much better than their record, but I do think that Colorado is a bit better than their win-loss suggests. And I think Kansas State can play into that too, because this is a school, as you mentioned earlier, Christian, that we had high expectations for. We thought would be a team that'd be a factor in the Big 12. That does not look like the case, but it does still feel like the talent is there. That game against Baylor was really close. Sorry, y'all got robbed on that touchdown. I really think that changes the complexion of that game, and maybe changes the complexion of how we're speaking about Kansas State. But this being a better team than the record would suggest, to me, makes this a sneaky, scary matchup, maybe more so than even where you're playing at.
Yeah, I could make the argument that there's only probably 4 total plays this entire season that changes the fact from Kansas State being 2-4 to being 6-0. Like, so it's only just a handful of plays that can completely changes the entire narrative of the season. And a lot of it isn't on the players. It's more on the coaching staff and decision making. So the talent is absolutely there. There's no doubt about it. I don't want to go too far into the touchdown. Should have been a touchdown from Jace Brown with the helmet ripped off, because not even our coaches can decide if it's a good rule or not. And the Big 12 didn't make a statement, so they must not care as well. So I think we just have to eat it, take a hard swallow and move on from it. But yeah, I'm with you. It definitely changed the game for sure. But yeah, if you add that in, the fact that Kansas State really has nothing to lose other than the fact that if they don't win, then this team's going to be even more down the drain, and then even more questions loom for this pending coaching staff if anything changes. And then the fact that there's only one transfer portal in January and a max exodus is likely to happen. Other than that, they are playing with like full hearts, can't win or can't lose. Let's go full out in Manhattan against a team with TCU, which, might I remind you, they love playing, because that's how they won their Big 12 championship in 2022, beating the Horned Frogs.
Yeah, no, and let me say, I think it is a good rule. I think y'all just had the bad side of a good rule. I like the rule that you can't play with your helmet off. Just sucks in situations like that. I'll leave it alone from there, but it's a tough one. But you mentioned the Big 12 championship, and one of the things we talked about is the idea of whether or not this is personal. I want you to lay that out a little bit before we get to the TCU side of it, from my perspective.
Yeah, it's a perfect scenario for if I'm TCU, right? I mean, you just coming off probably what was another personal game for Sonny Dykes, losing that opening game in 2023 after the tough loss in a national championship game, like the coming out game of Deion Sanders at Colorado on national TV. You kind of got, dare I say, embarrassed in that game. And Sonny Dykes comes out, and you could tell, there's no doubt that there was a little bit of making it personal and winning that game last week against the Buffaloes. Now, you get one more week to continue that energy and move it forward. If that was the same mentality, if they were making any of that game last week personal and they got that result, that, you know, that nice green W that I like to call them in the win column, in the record column, then you know they're going to continue that narrative and move it forward for Kansas State. Sonny Dykes is going to say, hang on, wait a minute. We just made it personal from 2023. Let's take about 3 months back, take a step back to that Big 12 championship game where we lost to Kansas State in 2022. Yeah, we might have had the upper edge on them and wound up making it to the national championship, got the last laugh, and we went farther in the season, but we never got to raise Dr. Pepper. We never got to raise the championship of all 23 flavors in Arlington that year, and now I want to make this one personal. And the way that you could make this one personal even more, we mentioned how statistically Kansas State is still in contention for the Big 12 championship with only 2 losses in the conference, although we're talking in the early stages of October. Sonny Dykes and TCU could absolutely bury the Wildcats and end any doubt whatsoever that this team is completely done for the rest of the season.
You know what? And you know what makes it even worse is after losing that game, after not being able to raise the Dr. Pepper, you go out and get blown out the next season. So now you have – that's the thing that makes it difficult. Like, well, are you trying to get revenge for 2023? You trying to get revenge for the 2022 Big 12 championship game? Are you trying to get revenge? And I think that losing to a team that you beat during the regular season in the conference championship always makes things sting a little bit more. So I think the idea of looking for revenge is a great idea. I think it's a great extra piece of motivation of the last time we played this team, they blew us out. Last time we played before that, they stole an opportunity. Yes, we still made it to the playoffs, but they stole an opportunity for us to have a championship in our trophy case. So I think that this is the perfect opportunity to make a game more than it is. And I think you and I, for how long we've been around sports, know that people in sports love to make things more than it needs to be, just to add an extra little chip of motivation on their shoulders. So we'll move forward and look at some of the pivotal matchups, some of the pivotal players. And one of the guys I didn't talk about, so we'll try to make sure we get him in, is Dylan Edwards. I have questions about his health, but that running game starts, in my opinion, with Avery Johnson's legs on how they could hurt TCU the most. We'll take a look at that as we continue with our crossover Thursday. Today's episode is brought to you by Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on your new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts at your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. And so often we have to wait 3-4 days. Like I said, no. Doorstep tomorrow. Start your project tomorrow. Doesn't matter if you feel like, oh, it's last minute. No such thing. Go to Supply House today. So if you need parts fast, just go ahead and select the next day delivery or use the part finder to quickly find what you need in order to get the job done. Their Trade Master perks, Christian, these are the things that I love because they have priority shipping, dedicated support. It makes the whole process smoother in case I decide I want to be Bob the Builder or Mr. Fix-It at the apartment. Join the free Trade Master program today and score some serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use the promo code SHCollege5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. You know, most people can't name all of their financial investments or whether that's 401ks, properties, right? Savings, checking. No, a lot of people don't know it all. Or they're using 5-6 apps in order to get it done. First off, you need to have an awareness of everything that's on the table, because when you leave money off the table, you may not notice it now, but you will definitely feel it later. And secondly, clear some of that space off your phone and just use one app. Centralize it. Make it easy on yourself. Doesn't matter if you're betting the over, you're betting the under. Maybe you have a parlay that extends through the entire Big 12, and you're saying this is going to be the one. I have a friend who bet rent on a bet. Didn't win. You know what? So maybe he should have been using Monarch money and he could have allocated some of those money from his savings. Or maybe he just shouldn't have done the bet. I don't know. But Monarch money would have made whatever the outcome was much easier. So roll to Monarch money. And listen, don't let this financial opportunity slip through the cracks. Use the code LOCKEDONCollege at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com. As we continue rolling on today's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs and Locked On Kansas State, I'm Darrion Gray. That's Christian Rao. We're breaking down this week's matchup in Big 12 play. And one of those guys that I didn't name was Dylan Edwards in the last segment. What's going on with his health? Are we expecting to see full Edwards or limited Edwards? Any Edwards?
Yeah, that's a really good question, right? I don't know if we'll have the true answer until later this afternoon when the coordinators talk. Matt Wells, the offensive coordinator, usually talks on Thursday afternoons, and then we'll get an idea of what the status of a Dylan Edwards is if he decides to answer that. Because look, heading into that game against Baylor, it was the conversation was nothing about the health of Dylan Edwards. It was going into the UCF game the week before, after the bye week, was he's ready to go. And he played great against UCF. He was showing that he can be that true running back one that we've all expected him to be. And then the following week, didn't hear any grumblings about Dylan Edwards being really banged up yet again. And we see him only with a few snaps and wasn't really able to do anything with those snaps as well. Joe Jackson had to take over on his birthday, might I add, but had to take over the running back one duties. He did a good job, but not that same explosive type of running back that you would get from Dylan Edwards. Look, there's been 2 times so far since Dylan Edwards has been seen as that true running back one for Kansas State, since DJ Giddens decided to opt out of the bowl game last year and then, of course, entered the NFL draft now at Indianapolis Colt. Dylan Edwards was shined in the Rate Bowl game against Rutgers, had, I think, 196 yards rushing. He was absolutely insane, picked up a couple receiving receptions as well. He showed that he could be that true guy. And then just 2 weeks ago against UCF, those are the only 2 times we have had the, dare I say, the expectation of what we can get from Dylan Edwards when he is fully healthy, ? We don't really have that answer moving forward now. I made a segment earlier this week on Locked On Kansas State, and I asked, are we ever going to see this full offensive arsenal that we were hoping to have going into this season? We either have the fact that Dylan Edwards is injured. He got injured on the first play, before the first play of the offense in Dublin. He got hurt on the punt return. Didn't even see a single offensive snap until Arizona in week 4 or 5. And then the receivers are being injured as well. And then, of course, the fact of will you run Avery Johnson or will you not? The offense, in my opinion, has been in shambles all season long, and it's because we're not getting the full expectation of them. And that starts with not having a full, healthy Dylan Edwards.
Well, not a full Edwards supply. You're going to be looking at Avery Johnson a lot more. And I know the idea of whether or not they run him will be a question mark. I'm not going to say I think they will, but I would
agree.
Because that is something that I think is a game changer for anybody. That's not TCU specific. That's not K-State specific. Your quarterback being able to run the football and play 11 on 11 is a game changer. And that's why that's actually my lead matchup is Avery Johnson versus the linebackers of TCU. I think Caleb Elarms has been absolutely fantastic. And if you haven't watched any TCU and you're just clicking on this game, I don't have to tell you his number. That's how well I feel like he's been playing at the linebacker spot. He flies around, whether it's in the run game, whether it's scrambling, whether it's pressuring. You don't see a lot of him in coverage. That's probably the one thing that you feel like he doesn't do a lot of noticeably, which is a good thing and a bad thing, I guess. And not really a bad thing. It's more of a good thing because you don't want to notice your players in coverage. I would normally say it's a bad thing because you can't talk about it in depth here. But then Nnamdi Obiazor, his running mate, is really athletic. He flows around. You'll see him in coverage a little bit more. You have Max Carroll who come into the game. I really like the TCU linebackers. I'd argue, quick thought on whether or not I want to say that. I do. I do. I think the linebackers are the position that I like the most. There's safety. I like Buddy Clark. I like Jamel Johnson. But honestly, it's a close call. TCU's linebackers are my favorite position on this team. You know, I didn't know if I want to speak out of turn.
Wow.
You know, I could change my opinion next week. I don't know. Like it's really a 3-unit rotation. Wide receiver, I think they're super deep at wide receiver. I love the wide receivers. Sorry, the offensive line discredits the running back, so they can't be my favorite unit. But wide receiver, safety, and linebacker. Those are the 3 that I feel myself cycling through. And today, at least, it's the linebackers because how well that Elarms has been playing. Obiazor had a really good game last week where he had that interception on the goal line. He flew around all day. They're athletic, and that's the thing that you need against a quarterback that Coach Dykes described as the best athlete that they've played. I think that that's important when you're talking about using your legs. So linebacker versus Avery Johnson, to me, if you can stop that, you'll have a significantly better chance of stopping the K-State offense as a whole.
Yeah, I'm surprised, still shocked that you think the linebackers is your favorite compared to safeties. I thought you were going to say safeties because that's probably my most favorite position for TCU looking at them so far this year. I'd be happy to explain that to you later on if you want to get to that. But let's talk about these linebackers. Obiazor is incredible. I think he's not only one of the best pass rushers in the Big 12, but in the country. I think he's an amazing pass rusher, and he doesn't get enough credit because, I don't know, maybe people don't like saying his name. I don't know. But the fact that he doesn't get enough credit really, really bugs me. He is going to throw fits to Avery Johnson and the Kansas State offensive line. Would not be shocked if he gets at least a sack. I think he only has, 3 this season, but there's been multiple times where he's had so many good pressures on offenses, and he really makes the rest of that defense behind him make their job a lot easier because he gets so much pressure to the quarterback. I think that alone is going to make Avery Johnson have to make more decisions on the run and then eventually do run. But Chris Kleiman came out on Monday, head coach Kansas State, and said he's the best quarterback for a reason. This is the quote he said. And we're not going to run him 15 times a game. And I don't know if that's a fact because they didn't want to get him injured because they're also dealing with Dylan Edwards injuries. I don't know if you can even have that as an excuse. If you're 2-4 right now, you can't have that risk-averse kind of feeling. But let me put it this way. Since 2023, and there's a stat that's came out, Avery Johnson, when he runs the football at least 10 times a game, Kansas State is 7-3. When he runs it 14 times or more a game, they are 3-0. They haven't lost. So the fact that you say you're not going to run him, that's something that Chris Kleiman has come out to say on Monday. So maybe you don't have to worry about that if you're TCU, unless he's throwing you a complete blind curve, which that's never really been the case. And that's not really the MO of Chris Kleiman.
Okay.
You're not going to get Avery Johnson running the football. And maybe that's not a designed run thing. Maybe it's just, maybe he'll actually do some scrambles. But I think you're going to have an easier job slowing down Avery Johnson if Chris Kleiman is going out publicly and saying, yeah, we're not going to run arguably one of the best dual threat quarterbacks in college football. Switching to real fast to the reason why I said I like the safeties is exactly that. Avery Johnson might have to throw the football a lot more. He's coming off a career high game in passing yards last week against Baylor, although they got the loss. But I love these safeties for TCU. You mentioned Jamel Johnson. You mentioned Bud Clark. I'll even throw Austin Jordan in the mix as well. These guys are sticky, man. That's what I've got from this game, from the secondary of TCU. They are so sticky, and they get to the ball so fast. I mean, the interceptions they had off Salter last week were absolutely insane, especially the first one, how quick they got to the ball. And if I'm Kansas State, whose some receivers have struggled this year with separation, I'm nervous heading into this one after looking at what the secondary did against Colorado.
Yeah, no, listen, let's use transparency. I ain't played football since high school, but I was a linebacker at that time. I am a tad bit partial to the position. So okay. I will say that. But I love these plays. Like the wide receivers are typically my third when talking about my favorite positions. And I keep using the word favorite because favorite and best are different conversations. It's about what you prefer, and I think that the safeties don't get enough credit sometimes. I think there's a lot of attention on Bud Clark, but I think Jamel Johnson is a highly impactful player who has learned how to take the ball away. He's had 3 interceptions this year after having none in his career. He also forced an interception. That's not a stat, but he had a forced interception where he knocked that ball. We need to start having that. That needs to be a stat. Forced interceptions where you swat a ball and it ends up being an interception for somebody else, or you made the play on the ball. Or maybe you rushed the passer and you hit him while he was throwing. Forced interception needs to be a stat for advanced statistics. I don't know how, but this is my campaign. This is what I'm recording this. Pull the curtain back. October 8th. I know it's coming out the 9th, but October 8th, this is my time to campaign to add forced interceptions to all advanced statistics. But let's keep rolling. Let's keep rolling and let's get into our matchup, or excuse me, our preview and prediction of this game. And because we're on different sides, of course, we're on different sides, but let's get into it as we close out this Locked On crossover.
But before we do that, today's episode, this Locked On College crossover of Locked On Kansas State and Locked On Horned Frogs, is brought to you by Mazda. Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move. Mazda delivers confidence with every ride, with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anyone else as of August of 2025. You can make everyday drives feel anything but, from smooth handling to initiative controls. So like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you make every moment count, impossible becomes irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved. This episode of Locked On College Crossover is also brought to you by Quo. Quo is one of the tools that helps make a huge difference for business owners. It's formerly OpenPhone, if you remember that from the past, but it's the same great business system that you've heard me talk about before, just with a new name. And here's why it matters. Every missed phone call is money left on the table. Every customer conversation counts. You need a phone system that keeps you connected 24/7. Quo is the #1 business phone system that streamlines customer communications. It works right through an app on your phone or computer, so no more carrying 2 phones or relying on that landline. I love how Quo, formerly as OpenPhone, lets you team share one number and collaborate on calls and text, like inboxes, shared inboxes, so no customer gets left hanging. And their AI agent, a game changer. I mean, with AI, you have to use it these days or you're falling behind. It can answer after-hour phone calls, capture leads, and keep businesses moving forward, even when you are off the clock. So see why over 90,000 businesses trust Quo, formerly OpenPhone. Get started free and get 20% off your first 6 months at quo.com/lockedoncollege. That's QUO.com/lockedoncollege, all one word. If you've got existing numbers with another service, Quo will port them over at no extra charge. Quo, no missed calls, no missed customers.
As we're wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Horned Frogs and Locked On Kansas State, I'm Darrion Gray. That's Christian Rao. We're going to need AI to host Locked On Horned Frogs after this prediction, because I think TCU loses a very, very, very close matchup, I think that they are the better team, but TCU has to prove a couple of things to me. Number one, and maybe more importantly than anything else, what TCU needs to prove is that they can play in a hostile environment. Take out the history, take out how they played in Manhattan. Let's just look at how they played against Arizona State a couple of weeks ago. One thing that I think is going to be a constant in Big 12 play for the Horned Frogs is close matchups. I think they're going to play Kansas State close. They played Colorado close. They played Arizona State close. And some of that has been because highs in the first or highs in the fourth, but not necessarily continuing those highs throughout the game. I don't know if that's going to be the same reason this week, but I do think it's going to be close. In the hostility at Arizona State, they spoke about how it impacted them. Now, do you learn from that experience, or are you falling victim to it again? If it comes down to the wire against a team that has probably a little bit more talent than Colorado, but maybe not as much talent as Arizona State, do you make those plays in the clutch? You didn't versus the Sun Devils. You did versus the Buffs. That was the difference. When I'm looking at TCU, it's about proving it to me. Can you play in a hostile environment, and can you close out a game yet again? You're 1-1 in those situations, and you're 1-1 in those games. If you're trying to go to 2-1 as opposed to 1-2, you're going to have to make those big time plays, and you're going to have to weather the storm that is Manhattan. So razor thin, very close. I got Kansas State pulling it off. And if they can check those two boxes, TCU will make me look like a fool. And I'm okay with that. And I'll come on after the game Saturday, or I'll come on Monday because we won't have a post-game show. I guess I probably should have said that earlier in my week, but whatever. I'll look like a fool and I'll say, hey, I was wrong. And I'm happy to be wrong.
I don't think I've ever done a crossover, and I've been doing this for almost a year now. I don't think I've ever done a crossover where you've said Kansas State's going to win, and I'm on the flip side and said I think TCU's going to win. Usually we both agree to say our teams are going to win, and here's why. Yeah. But I'm on the other side. I think TCU wins this football game. Now, I'm subject to change. I still got another episode that comes out on Friday before the game on Saturday. Maybe I change my mind. Maybe I won't. I'm not sure because things are so crazy. And I think this game maybe is close, but I think they also could turn out to be a blowout with TCU. I love the fact, I don't love it as a Kansas State guy, but as a college football fan, I love the fact how well TCU just lines up against Kansas State. I mentioned how their secondary is sticky. Their wide receivers are dealing with some injuries right now. I think that Avery Johnson, although he's done a good job protecting the football this year for the most part, is coming off a pick six last game, but that was really the only bad play he had the entire game. Other than that, he's done a really good job protecting the football compared to last year. TCU could be a different beast when it comes to that one. The wide receivers have struggled with separation this season. Who knows with Dylan Edwards? If that makes Avery Johnson have to go one-dimensional, I think TCU's pass rush is absolutely insane. We didn't even talk about Josh Hoover. We didn't even talk about Eric McAllister. And look, I mean, I think Josh Hoover is one of the most underrated players in the Big 12. He's one of those ones. Him and Sawyer Robertson, I think, are one of the greater passers in the league. I give the nod to Robertson. I know I probably shouldn't say that on a TCU show, but Hoover is right there in my mind. Eric McAllister, I mean, if he's a true champ when you're throwing 50-50 balls to him. And we saw him with 2 touchdowns last week against Colorado. The secondary, although has improved with Kansas State this year, still a lot unproven, and maybe coming off one of their worst games against Baylor this past week against a star-studded passing offense with the Baylor Bears. It could happen again. And I think Eric McAllister could have another big game. That's why I think there's so many things that could go right for TCU. And then you add in that whole narrative that I mentioned at the beginning of this show, Darrion. Sonny Dykes is going to make this personal. He did it last week against Colorado. It worked. Why wouldn't he make it work again? So I'm going with TCU winning this one. I know it's I think a 1.5 point underdog. TCU is heading into this one against Manhattan, but I think they easily cover. And I would not be shocked if for the first time this season, Kansas State loses a football game by more than 1 score.
Well, I think definitely TCU has the ability to make that happen more than Kansas State does, right? I think if there's a big win, it's going to be TCU. And newsflash, breaking news, apparently Darrion and Christian will be trading shows for Friday's episode. That's
different
live
shades of
here,
purple, apparently.
Yeah, no, just switch over. If you don't look hard enough, you might think that this purple is Kansas State. But no, on a serious note, I do think TCU has the talent. I think that we are in agreement that TCU lines up to win this game. My only thing is they have to prove things to me, because I felt this same way going into Colorado, and I felt like that game was closer than it should have been. Even though Colorado plays everybody close, you can say the same thing about Kansas State. They play people close, right? Like, that's what they do. They lose, but they do not lose bad. And the same thing could have been said last week, and that's how the game played out. It's just scary to me. Some of the things that I've seen from the Frogs have been scary, and they need to prove it. That's it. Like, it's one of those things where I don't feel confident. If everybody goes in and they play their best and everybody plays how they should play, so to speak, and it was a neutral site, I'd say TCU wins.
Let me ask you this question. If TCU wins this game, you only have your only loss is still to Arizona State. You still only have one loss in the Big 12 Conference. How are you feeling about expectations for Arlington after this? Does it change at all with a win against Kansas State, or does it not move the needle for you?
It's a good question. I still have good hopes for them, right? Like, I still have good hopes that they can get it done, because I don't sit here. I know you may say, well, you have them losing to Kansas State, so assuredly you have them losing to another school that's of, a higher caliber. Not necessarily. I think they play Iowa State at home, if I'm not mistaken. I think they play BYU on the road. It's the hostile environment that does that for me. Like if they beat Kansas State and they weather the storm in a hostile environment, I will probably stop bringing that up. I'll say that. That's probably the one thing that will change. If TCU can go into Manhattan and just win, I don't even care how you win. If TCU wins, you won't hear me talk about inconsistencies on the offense, at least not in the beginning of the show on Monday. You won't hear me talk about hostile environments, because that means they at least have checked that box one time. It can change certain things like that. I still have a good hope for TCU as a playoff team, so I wouldn't say it changes that department. But you got to show that. You have to show you can play in hostile environments, because if you can't, you're not a championship team. You're not a playoff team. Those are the things that playoff teams can do, and the Frogs have to prove that they can do it in order for us to really cement them as a playoff team. And I guess in that way, it does kind of change how I feel.
I love it. All right, cool.
But yeah, so we'll see. I think that we are in agreement on everything on this matchup, outside of maybe how that environment will impact the game. I think that's the only reason that we kind of disagree in our picks. So it'll be interesting if they can get that monkey off their back. But go watch Locked On Kansas State. I believe in knowing the enemy. So Friday, go watch Kansas State. And if you're on the Kansas State side, come watch Locked On Horned Frogs and learn a little bit about your enemy. So in the meantime, in between time, until the next time that we hear each other, family, take care, stay blessed. Peace.